12:35 on TSN 690. Welcome back to Game Points with Matthew Ross. We're here till the top of the hour. Marco Polo is on the board. Mr. Mokan is here as well. And Stefano Micella lurking about. TSN Matthew on Twitter.com is our handle. Mokan19 for Mo. Let us talk a little Olympic hockey here on the program. And we thought, who better to bring in than somebody who's off for a couple of weeks now, hockey-wise. He is the proprietor of mayorsmanor.com. You can also follow him on twitter.com/mayornhl. It is John Hoven. Hey, John, how you doing?
Outstanding. How are you boys doing tonight?
Very well. Very well, thanks. Are you suffering hockey withdrawal yet?
You know, I'm not, because I keep busy with a variety of other activities, you know, whether it be UFC or drag racing or music or all sorts of other stuff. So, no hockey withdrawals yet,
Good.
and I'm not going to have an opportunity to because it looks like we're gonna get going in just a couple hours here.
Oh, that's right. Are you excited for the? Are you following the women closely as well?
No.
Well, it's kind of a big deal up in Canada. Probably the only country that looks at.
It's a big deal because Canada's going to win the gold medal. That's the only reason why it's a big deal.
Why? The U.S. beat them just recently.
There's no sport in beating handily 14 other teams, though. So it's just not that exciting of a tournament. Why don't they just get rid of all the other countries and let the Canada and U.S. Squads play a best-of-7 series? That would be more exciting, and I might be interested.
It is so bad, John, that they figured out a way to put the two teams in the same pool to play each other in the round robin, and to somehow not have to play each other in the semifinals, only in the finals. That's how bad it is.
Yeah, well, you do what you have to do, and I guess we'll tune in for the gold medal. Maybe that's it.
All right, fair enough. Let us talk about the men then. Let's move on here because we're getting reports all the time about who's practicing with who. It's getting ridiculous. I mean, and the media just wants this thing to get going already, clearly. Your thoughts on how things are shaping up for let's start with the Americans.
I think the big question for Team USA really is still in, the goaltending. Who's going to start there? I've been arguing for feels like 6 months now that the best goaltender in the world, bar none, is Jonathan Quick. So I don't see how you start Ryan Miller when it comes to the medal games. We all kind of know how it's going to play out. At least we think we know how it's going to play out, and that's going to be very similar to what happens with Canada. You're going to have one goaltender start game one, another goaltender start game two, and then the real fun begins, who starts the rest of the tournament. So I would expect Jonathan Quick in goal, for the Americans. And other than that, it's a grinding team. It has some similarities to the 2010 team from Vancouver in the sense that they're not being given a lot of credit or a lot of respect, by most people. And these are guys that primarily are gamers, and they're going to have to come up big. So we'll see how it plays out. When
I look at all of the teams in this tournament, I see a lot of talent, obviously, on all of them. But to me, John, where I see separation, and I'm not saying that Canada can match up goaltending-wise. I think Finland's unbelievable. You mentioned Quick and Miller, certainly. But to me, where maybe there's a bit of separation here is on defense. I think that Canada's just so darn deep on defense with guys like Doughty and Duncan Keith and having a guy like PK Subban as maybe even on the sidelines in the press box. I mean, to me, that's the difference here. If you look at Finland and Sweden, they have tremendous upfront depth, maybe even goaltending, but the defense not as strong.
Well, there's no doubt that Canada is the deepest team. I mean, everybody knows that. Canada could probably field two squads, and they would both be competitive. So Canada absolutely is strong. I think that Canada is not as strong in goal as the Americans. Canada certainly has more firepower, and they have more defense, like you just mentioned right there. I mean, the U.S. doesn't offer, and nor do most of the other countries, offer a top line that's going to give you something that can match Sidney Crosby and Jeff Carter. So, I mean, you can start there up front, and then you mentioned some of the names on defense. And Canada's the most balanced team. I would certainly say that. Russia is strong in net. Russia's missing defensively. They're going to have a lot of difficulties, and they might do fine with their top line, but when you start getting into the depth players deeper on the Russian squad, they're not as deep or balanced as Canada and the U.S., in my opinion.
Chatting with John Hoven of mayorsmanor.com, Mayor NHL on Twitter.com if you want to follow him there as well. I'm curious to see what some of these quote-unquote lesser countries are going to come up with here, John. The who's going to be the Belarus of 2002 here? Switzerland obviously is making their way up in the world, certainly with Hiller and Nets and some of those guys on defense. And then you look at some of the other teams. You look at a team like Austria with Vanek and Grabner. Maybe they can pull a little bit of magic here and pull off one upset. Do you see any of that happening in this tournament, or do you expect it to kind of go chalk?
Well, you certainly have the opportunity, because once you get past the preliminary rounds, you get, everybody talks about this. You get into those one and done situations, and you never know what's going to happen. It just takes one bad bounce. And, everybody knows in the National Hockey League, we've seen plenty of weird things happen this year, goals going through the goaltender's jersey or through his pants and, ending up in the net, or the Kings against Detroit and going off the netting. I mean, there's all sorts of fluky, goofy stuff that's happened in the National Hockey League just in the past few weeks. And it's just going to take one of those situations for a Finland or the Czech Republic or the Slovakia, any of those teams. And you mentioned Switzerland, and there are others that all of a sudden in those one and done situations, it's going to feel like a Game 7 in the third period with a favored team with their back up against the wall. I think that you can look at it, the teams that have the better goaltending. We keep coming back to that and talking about that. I mean, look at a guy like Tuukka Rask and what he can give you. Even a guy like Antti Niemi, what he can give you. If he can make it a one-goal game, and he doesn't need a lot of those type of players don't need a lot of offensive support. So regardless of who they end up being matched up against, a 1-0 game, a 2-1 game, those type of goaltenders can steal it, and they're going to make some noise. Slovakia, to me, is the team that when you look over the last maybe 10 years, you look at the World Junior tournaments, you look at the Olympics, the World Championships, they always seem to be right there on the fringe, okay? There are 4 big teams here, obviously. There's Sweden, there's Russia, the U.S., and Canada. But in that next group, where you have Finland, the Czech Republic, Slovakia, for some reason, always ends up being a team that you want to keep an eye on. You don't necessarily go into the tournament thinking that they're a team that's going to do a lot of damage, and all of a sudden they rattle off a couple of wins, or they give a couple of scares to some people, and you go, hey, wait a minute, I need to start watching that team. They develop some really nice players over there, and I think that's going to be a team that you might want to keep an eye on.
In terms of what you're looking forward to the most, John, is it a line combination? Is it a country versus another country? What's getting you excited for?
I think it's mainly the standard matchups. Canada-U.S. is obviously going to be a big game. If you get into a situation where Canada plays Russia, that's going to be a big game as well. Specifically here in Los Angeles, going to keep an eye on the Slovenian team. This is their first opportunity making it to the Olympics. Of course, Mr. Kopitar, as I call him, is behind the bench and is the coach, and Andrzej Kopitar, who is a world-class elite player and just is largely an unknown on an international stage and even in North America, because he plays on the Western Conference and doesn't get the hype of the Crosbys and the Ovechkins and those sorts of players. So look, Slovenia doesn't have a chance. They're not going to medal. It would be an absolute, it would be huge. It probably would surpass, the miracle on ice in 1980. It would be crazy if they ended up in a medal game. But it will be interesting to see when the U.S. plays Slovenia. So you have Dustin Brown playing against, Andrzej Kopitar and that sort of thing. Drew Doughty did make a funny comment to me before leaving. I was asking him about having the opportunity to lay a hit on one of his teammates, and although he's playing the U.S., he really wasn't looking forward to laying a hit on Dustin Brown. He was hoping that somehow Slovenia made it out of their bracket and that Canada ended up playing them, because he was really looking forward to laying a hit on Andrzej Kopitar. So, I doubt it's going to happen, but it does make for some fun and would be pretty intriguing to watch if it did take place.
John, the NHL lucked out in 2002 when USA played Canada, of course, in 2010, both in North America, Salt Lake, and Vancouver, respectively. Who wins out this year in terms of the Sochi Olympics with the NHL? Do they get a bigger European audience, or will North America still tune in to watch a Russia versus Sweden if that's the gold medal final?
Yeah, well, I certainly think that Russia has a lot of pressure on them. They have a lot to prove. I just don't like their defense, and so therefore I don't think that they're going to end up in the gold medal game. I think you'll probably see, Canada over there and Russia probably playing for a bronze medal. But it wouldn't surprise me because, the other factor, and we all talk about it, and it's true, and I think that's one of the reasons why it gets a lot of play, and that is how is that larger ice surface going to end up affecting certain players and certain teams. So we saw it in the World Junior Tournament recently as well. Canada and the U.S., which have been two of the dominant teams in recent World Juniors, when those games have been played over in North America for the most part, all of a sudden we go overseas and we see how Finland has a remarkable run and also some of the other European countries. So you have those Russian players who maybe they don't have that world-class defense and some of those players you were mentioning here a few moments ago, but they do have the experience on that larger ice surface. And the larger ice causes a number of problems. And it also causes problems for the goaltenders because they do have those different sight lines. And, just specifically to the players here in Los Angeles, I was speaking with Dustin Brown about it and asking him if his experience in going overseas and playing on the larger ice during the lockout, if that gives him any sort of an advantage, because normally, it would have been several years since he's seen that larger ice surface. And so while he wouldn't say it, I do think it gives an advantage to some of those NHL guys who haven't spent a lot of time on the larger ice, but recently did it, as recently as the lockout, or maybe some guys that went over there during the World Championships, and, refamiliarized themselves, if you will, with the difference of playing up along the boards, because the game is played differently because of that extra room out there. And as Dustin Brown said, if you try to play the game out along the boards, you're in no man's land. And that's different than the way you play the game here in North America. So I certainly think that the Europeans are going to have that advantage. And it's a long-winded answer to get to your question that I think you are going to see Sweden, as an example, that's going to be up there in the mix, more so than you probably would have expected if they would have played the North American game, on this continent, and it would have been dominated by Canada and the U.S. like it was in 2002 and like it was in 2010.
John Hoven from mayorsmanor.com, Mayor NHL on Twitter.com as well. Enjoy the Olympics. We'll chat with you soon.
Let's get our picks in there real quick.
I'm going to go Sweden over Canada.
In the gold medal game?
Yep.
Yeah, you're probably right. Damn it. And then Russia and the U.S. for the bronze?
Yep.
Yeah, I think so too.
I think so. Yep. All right. Thanks, man.
All right, see you later, boys.